Insomniacs Anonymous presents the retelling of true stories collected from the darkest corners of the web. Stranger under the bed. I was 21 when this happened. I was moving into my first apartment. The door that led to my apartment locked itself automatically when it closed. I was going to the entrance of my apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail, still using the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch out for it. That's when I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me, facing away from me, so I couldn't see his face. And he didn't see me trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head. I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just going to take a shower and call you right back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned on the shower, and then jumped out my window. Then I called the police. They told me to wait close by, but perhaps go across the street and see if anybody could wait with me. I went across the street hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came too just before the police arrived. I gave them the keys and they went inside. Moments later, 2 cops came out, holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house told me the man was standing outside my bathroom door with a kitchen knife, waiting for me to come out. I was a mess at this point, shivering and crying. This man had somehow crept into my apartment while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man was trying to hurt me. He turned out to be a homeless man and was placed in a mental institute. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. The woman singing at night. Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool. It wasn't till I was 13 that my mum finally let me. She told me to wear a helmet, take my phone and a flashlight, and she set the parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which seemed like a lot to me, so right after the sunset, I was off. There were no people out walking their dogs, no kids running about. The temperature was perfect. I was having so much fun that I ignored the limits my mum had set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. I was flying down this hill, having an absolute blast, with no thought of the limits that my mum had set. However, my mum had set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside of the limit was close to houses and people. But outside of that, specifically the path I was on, led to a barren area. I rode for another 10 minutes before looking back. I could only just make out some of the lights of the houses back inside the limits. After 15 minutes of riding along the dirt path, I heard singing. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, but she wasn't singing the words, just the melody with her vocals. Her voice was strange. You know when you have a scratchy throat? It kind of sounded like that. Raspy. I inched forward to try and see her. I got close enough to see the silhouette of her hair bouncing up and down, like she was headbanging along. I get my flashlight out. I'm thinking that maybe this person is in need of help or something. Or maybe it's an insane person and the light might scare them away. So I take out the flashlight and point it at her and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be matted and stuck together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped and uneven. She was wearing a very oversized, bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could and said, "Sorry," in a very, "oops, this is the wrong room" kind of way. But she didn't respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screams. She screams in an awful, awful, high-pitched voice. I nearly messed my pants as I threw myself onto my bike and pedaled off as fast as I could. But I could hear her voice getting close to me. I didn't look back, and I didn't stop pedaling, until her scream finally grew quieter and quieter, until it dissolved completely into the howling of the wind. The Cockroach. Years ago, I was on a cross-country trip, solo, heading towards a family reunion. I was supposed to make it to a friend's house, but the weather was horrible, and it was slow going. Then a terrible accident happened just ahead of me, and I was stuck in traffic for quite a while. All told, I was 5 hours behind schedule. I was exhausted, in need of a bathroom and shower, so I pulled into a strip motel. It was obviously small and dirty, but it would work in a pinch. There was a window to the outside where I could check in. The guy there eyed me up and down. I was a college girl at this time, and asked me if I was traveling alone. I handed him my ID and credit card, but he insisted, cash only. Red flags were going off at this point, but I scrounged together just enough cash and he tossed me a key. The room was filthy, barely big enough to fit the bed. The first thing I did was go to the bathroom. Then I flipped up the mattress. It was filthy, stained, and there were signs of bed bugs. A moment later, I saw a cockroach. That was it. I was out. I decided I would use the parking space at least and sleep in the back of my car. I curled up, using my suitcase for a pillow and random clothes for blankets, and fell asleep for an hour. Then, I woke up, aware of someone talking on a phone outside. I glanced up to see the guy from the check-in standing outside. It was around 3 a.m. He finished up his call, then walked quietly over to my room. He unlocked the door and let himself in. The lights did not turn on. Another minute or two later, he came back out, slamming the door behind him and cursing, with another guy. I hadn't seen two enter, so I still don't know where he came from. They angrily talked for a moment, and then the check-in guy walked over to my SUV. I covered my head quickly with clothes. He tried to unlock the door. He peered into the back seat, but between my tinted windows, and blending into the general mess of clothes and suitcases, he didn't see me in the back. The two guys walked away to the far side of the parking lot, talking more, gesturing across the street where a diner was. While they were distracted, I climbed into the front seat and started up the SUV. They turned around in surprise as I pulled out. I called my friends back home and told them, but I didn't want to worry my family, so I said nothing to them. When I got back home 3 weeks later, we figured out the name of the hotel thanks to Google Maps and called the police. They told me the place had closed down only days before I arrived. He pretended to be my dog. My husband and I lived in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side of the house, which opened up to the laundry room. When we're too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto a long line that's attached to one of the pipes around the corner of the house so he can go out and use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door in our laundry room, but we'd noticed the large step from the laundry door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting our dog go out through the front door instead, since the porch was much lower to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him out one last time before bed. I took him to his line, closed the door, and locked it. Then I head into the kitchen to put away some dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he uses the bathroom quickly, he liked to spend some time out the front for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door. This is how my dog signals he wants to come back inside. So I head over and let him back in. Since I've always been somewhat paranoid, I always take the time to look through the door's peephole before opening the door. Instead of seeing my dog, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze, my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch, this one louder than the last. This one makes me up from my initial shock and I run to grab my phone. I call my husband and tell him what's happening. He's very confused. I couldn't explain the situation very well, but he said he's on the way home. That's when I realize my dog is still outside with this person. I head back to the front door, trying to make as little noise as possible to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed, staring at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as possible. I can't see my dog anywhere, and the side of my house is covered in gravel. I knew I couldn't step out without making a lot of noise. My heart was pounding in my chest. I went to the front door to keep an eye on the stranger and get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel they would take me seriously at the time, since he was just standing there, not doing anything in particular. I even tried taking a picture of him with my phone, but the camera was only able to take pictures of the peephole and not through it. Suddenly, the man looked directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me through the peephole, then opens his mouth to show this taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few moments. With that, he turned around and began to walk down the street. I stayed in place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband arrived home after a few minutes. He convinced me to call the police, and we went out looking for my dog. Turns out the man had cut the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time to explore the neighbor's backyard, which is where we found him. It's been years since this happened. We've since moved away. The police were unable to come up with any suspects. But ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down. The Bag Lady. I've always had an innate fear of the night. Not so much the dark, but the night itself. As a child, my imagination was overrun with stories of creatures that come alive at night. There was never anything particular to base this fear on, until a night when I decided to go with a buddy of mine to a baseball game. That night the game went into extra innings, so I didn't get a chance to drop my friend off at home until well after 1 a.m. Everything was fine on the way home until I hit a light right before the street that led to my house. It was a T-junction and I was turning left. This is the kind of light that takes forever. You start to think it's broken until it finally turns green. Of course, I pulled up just as it turned red. I was thinking about just running the light, seeing there was no one there, and it was getting close to 2 a.m. on a school night. But early in the week I'd heard the phrase, "Character is what you do when no one is looking." And for whatever reason, that was the night I decided to prove to myself that I was a man of character. Big mistake. I pulled up to a stoplight, feeling good about myself, when I happened to look out my window to my left and notice a lady sitting alone on a bus bench. We briefly made eye contact, but I quickly looked away. It was too late. I could see movement out of my peripheral vision, and I knew she was coming my way. I looked out the window and noticed she was carrying a bag. I quickly checked that my doors were locked and all my windows were up. I then moved my right foot above the accelerator just in case, to brace myself for an escape. I was hoping it would be just an awkward exchange, and was praying for the light to change quickly before she could reach me, but I knew there was slim chance of that. She walked right up to my window, put her bag down, and began to tap on my window. I nervously looked up at her, and she motioned for me to pull down my window. I had an automatic window and was afraid I would push it too hard and automatically have it come all the way down. But I took a deep breath and lightly flicked it with my finger. The window moved down microscopically, but she did not seem to notice or care, and began to talk. She said, "My boyfriend beat me up, and I have a friend down the street. Can you give me a ride?" I should stop and give a brief physical description of the bag lady. She was small and skinny, and I couldn't really tell how old she was. She may have been in her mid-20s but lived hard on the street, or maybe she was much older than that. All that to say, just by looking at her, there was no way to verify her story. She looked beat up by life, not just by her boyfriend. But there was something about her delivery, it seemed robotic and rehearsed. But she made my skin crawl, and after a brief debate on whether or not I should do it, I told her I had to get home and I couldn't give her a ride. After my refusal, she leaned in closer and said the same thing again. "My boyfriend beat me up. I have a friend who lives down the street. Could you give me a ride?" This time I felt more confident when I declined to give her a ride. I told her I had a curfew and had to get home. She leaned in a third time and began her statement again. "My boyfriend beat me." At this point, the light had changed. I slowly lifted my foot off the brake, and the car rolled forward. I started muttering an apology. She didn't move. She just looked at the light and looked at me, leaned in closer, and said 5 words that have haunted me ever since. "You made the right decision." Then she picked up her bag and walked back towards the bench. I have no idea what she planned to do, or if there are other people waiting to jump in my car from the bushes, but that encounter has haunted me ever since and confirmed in my mind that nothing good happens after dark. Well, that's all for this episode. I look forward to the next one.